Dear colleagues, good morning. Welcome to our CERFAM webinar with our colleagues from the Regional Office of West Africa and East Africa. We are just waiting and giving more five to 6 minutes so that we give the time for our colleagues to join. So bear with us and we will come back soon. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, welcome to this webinar, jointly organized by WFP Regional Bureau for West Africa, the Regional Bureau for East Africa, and CERFAM. CERFAM is the Regional Center of Excellence to fight against hunger and malnutrition in Africa. So I'm Pateforme here. I'm a director at interim of CERFAM, and I'll be the facilitator today during this session. We'll look at the knowledge exchange platform that CERFAM has developed, but more critically, looking at how good practices and could be leveraged through South-South cooperation and capacity strengthening. So we're very pleased to have today distinguished guests who will introduce us to the topic through their opening remarks, but also a lot of colleagues from the field in both regional bureaus, head of programs, colleagues working on knowledge management, other colleagues working moreover on program and policy area. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Evelyn Eti, who is making us the honor to deliver opening remarks on behalf of Mr. Chris Nikoy, the Regional Director for West and Central Africa. So welcome, Evelyn. The floor is yours. Don't forget to unmute your mic.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm on mute, so I'm sure you can hear me. And nice to see Brenda online as well in Johannesburg. So dear colleagues, let me start by welcoming you all to this joint webinar, NRBD, to introduce CEPT, the knowledge management platform of CERFAM. CERFAM is our Abidjan-based regional center of excellence against hunger and malnutrition. It is our pleasure to open this webinar and to see so many of you online from different countries. And of course, I can see Brenda and colleagues around the region. Nice seeing you all. WFP, along with other development actors, believe that effective knowledge management can play a central role to not only better inform policy and program implementation, but also help accelerate progress against zero hunger. Practically, knowledge management efforts will help facilitate and leverage country offices, countries as a whole, access to successful experiences, which can be scaled up and or adopted to other contexts. Strengthening our efforts in this area is extremely timely, as now, with COVID crisis, it will be a critical time to draw on the lessons of previous shocks and to invest in innovation solutions to mitigate and the consequences of current and future shocks. And in addition, Africa has already many unexploited good practices and local solutions that deserve to be better known and can be scaled up in support of national efforts to fight hunger and malnutrition. In this context, I'm sure WFP and more specifically CERFAM has an important role to play to foster the dissemination of good practices in Africa. Knowledge management is indeed at the heart of CERFAM's mission. Launched in March 2019, in partnership with the government of Côte d'Ivoire, CERFAM is a platform that enables learning exchange to respond to the increasing demands of national governments and development partners that strive to strengthen their national capacities and knowledge management practices. The development of its knowledge exchange platform CERFAM, which you'll hear about throughout the day, is part of CERFAM's strategy to support these efforts. CERFAM is a powerful tool to document and improve access to good practices and experience, facilitate exchanges and replication of good practices, which will play a crucial role to, first and foremost, support governments and partners to draw on lessons of previous shocks and to invest in innovative solutions to mitigate and tackle the consequences of current and future shocks. And secondly, it will also collect evidence-based practices which can inform policy making and programming with the aim of strengthening national systems. In the medium term, it will be critical to learn lessons towards strengthening good food systems to enable resilience and tackle the underlying causes of hunger, as well as putting in place robust social protection measures that ensure people have access to the social assistance they very much need. To be a bridge to all partners and to channel their successful experiences and make it accessible widely in the African continent is very important. I'm glad to share some good practices made so far. I'm actually proud to share some good practices made so far. CERFAM has already 4 good practices in the database, 10 experts in diverse areas, and around 60 registered users. So please make sure you're registered if you're not. And make sure you encourage people to do so. A robust CERFAM will facilitate access to good practices from across the African continent with the right expertise to accompany its replication. That's why going forward, we count on you to help us populate CERFAM with good practices, experience, and participate in this very experienced forum in which experts and partners can discuss about good practice documentation and replication. These 2 webinars, the one today and the one tomorrow, are the result of a very fruitful collaboration amongst our 2 regional bureaus, and I'm glad it's RBN, which I used to belong to, and our regional bureau here in Dakar, and of course CERFAM, our colleagues in Abidjan, who are doing a great job. So this will help us learn more about knowledge management and the tools available to advance working, documentation, and learning on good practices, aiming to improving implementation of SDG 2. They present a unique opportunity to exchange about CERFAM's good practice methodology and its concrete application on CERFAM. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very fruitful webinar today and tomorrow. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Evelyn, for very inspiring opening remarks that are already giving the right tone. I think it's about good practices, it's about knowledge management. Without further ado, I will pass the floor now to Brenda Behan, Deputy Regional Director for East Africa. Over to you, Brenda.
Many thanks, Patrick and Evelyn, for this opportunity. I think Evelyn has probably said it all, so I will be very, very short in my remarks. I really just wanted to thank you for this opportunity to collaborate. I think it's a fantastic example of the intra-bureau collaboration and exchange also, as we know of colleagues across the offices. I think enhances that collaboration. We really are keen on focusing on this whole idea of the CERFAM's role in promoting best practices and ensuring that we have the access of our country offices to those best practices, and really in working in that sort of South-South technical collaboration. area. So we're very excited about this opportunity, and then looking forward to hearing, exactly how this works. I think we also have a bit of work to do to later on to work with our country offices to also help support and guide them on how do we really identify these best practices, and how do we ensure that we're learning from the other examples in other country offices, and how do we really adapt those to the realities that exist in our region and in each specific country office. And I just wanted to say also that I think this is an important knowledge management effort, and that area of knowledge management is something that I feel quite strongly about. And I think that we have to recognize that we have a lot of work to do within the organization to ensure that we're doing knowledge management in the best way possible. And that's really about also becoming a more effective and efficient organization, because we don't want to have people reinventing the wheel or not knowing what their colleagues are doing, because it is fundamentally also a question of how effective we can be with our resources, and in particular with our human resources, and how we can really act as a learning organization. And I think that that is fundamental. This use of knowledge and best practice across these two regions will also enable us to really learn from what is happening in various different realities, but then also to put together the good evidence base that we need to actually adapt our programs, and in fact to validate some of the pathways that we are taking forward in both regions. So thank you very much, Evelyn and Patrick, for this, and also on our side, Lydia in particular, who's been leading on this. And I look forward to the session today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Very powerful words as well. Very inspiring. Evelyn and Brenda, we're really happy to have you on board. We know that you are sound supporters of WFP as a learning organization, and this is about it. How do we really make sure that we strengthen WFP enabling role? How can we leverage the potential of good practices to inform better intervention, to support national systems? This is what we're going to discuss today during this workshop. And I'm really glad the tone has been given. And as Brenda said, and Evelyn, most of it has already been delivered during the opening remarks. I hope we still have something to say about that. For those who are wondering what is CERFAM, who maybe are hearing us for the first time or just need a refreshment or what CERFAM is, allow me just to introduce very briefly what CERFAM is, what the mission is, before we get into the knowledge exchange platform that will be the main topic to be discussed today. So CERFAM, as you may know, is a partnership between the government of Côte d'Ivoire and the World Food Programme. So following the good examples set by the Center of Excellence of Brazil and the Center of Excellence in China, so the government of Côte d'Ivoire has approached WFP to establish this Center of Excellence based in Abidjan. So it is the first Center of Excellence in Africa that looks at contributing to accelerating the progress towards ending hunger and malnutrition in Africa. Within this decade of accelerated progress, so CERFAM has this mission to be, I would say, this platform that would enable that to happen. So the vision of CERFAM is really to be this catalyst or a hub, call it a platform, where good practices would be accessible by country offices, other partners, and also innovative and promising solutions, and also the expertise could be deployed to help implement those good practices in Africa. So our strategic objective is really to promote and facilitate the access to knowledge. You call it exchange of knowledge, and we have a good example of this inter-regional collaboration. This is about making sure that what works somewhere could be accessible somewhere else. And this is done through South-South cooperation and capacity development. Next. Thanks. So CERFAM is about 4 pillars mainly. That's where the basis of our work. Those pillars are research. We need to have a growing body of evidence, good practices that are really relying on strong data that has been proven through implementation, through strong research. This is all about making sure that we bring about state-of-the-art good practices on the table. Technical assistance, this is another pillar of CERFAM. CERFAM provides technical assistance, not only on policy dialogue, but also on the formulation of programs and supporting country demands to bring about the transformation they need through the good practices. Technical assistance, we will be providing more examples of what has been done since CERFAM has been established. Partnership. We all agree that nobody knows it all, nobody can do it alone. We need multi-sectorial, multifaceted partnerships across the board. This whole of society approach is really one of the bases of CERFAM. So besides the government of Côte d'Ivoire, we partner with many other governments in Africa, interregional organizations like the African Union, the regional organization like ECOWAS, but also UN agencies, civil society organization, the donors, you name them. Partnership really is a core element of CERFAM's work. Advocacy and communication. In this world of competing demand, we really need to make sure that elimination of hunger remain at top of agenda of the investment, of the efforts made by the governments. We need to bring really about the good practices and build strong cases. So the main areas where CERFAM are working are the traditional programmatic areas in which WFP excel so well in both regions and across the world. So homegrown school feeding is one of those areas. Rural development with a focus on post-harvest management. Nutrition, combating all forms of malnutrition with a focus on food safety and quality, and increasingly more on the potential of food fortification as a game changer. Community resilience. So these are the core programmatic areas that CERFAM aims to leverage through South-South cooperation and capacity strengthening. So in a nutshell, CERFAM service offering is double. If you need to remember, CERFAM support the promotion of good practices. So through this exchange platform, and we will see how CAP help us do that. So CERFAM work with country offices and partner to identify, document, disseminate good practices and lessons learned in the fight against hunger and malnutrition. The second fold of the service offering is the capacity strengthening. How do we mobilize and deploy the technical expertise that is needed, that comes with the good practices, to take it to scale wherever it exists, to replicate somewhere else by deploying the expertise, the expert, human resources, the technology, the other type of resources that are needed for that. So South-South cooperation is critical, and we said, and it was said during the opening remark, Africa has a plethora of good practices that need to be known and leveraged and used. And knowledge management is really the core of that. So just a couple of examples of those practices that we have already identified, just to give you an example that is not limited just to West Africa. Dry card with a technology that was implemented in Rwanda. Pro4 is from Chad. We did have also very good practices on supporting the cassava value chain in Congo. There are more to come that you will certainly be introduced by our colleagues. So I insisted enough on the importance of South-South cooperation, and CERFAM really received requests from governments to go and assist them in doing that. That's what happened with the Republic of Congo. We did receive recently a request from the government of the Republic of Guinea to look at the value chain of rice, and we're working toward that. It's really important to see how we have those good practices that we can go and implement where it is needed most through this strategic but also very operational collaboration. So CERFAM webpage is available if you want more information. The platform is there. So without further ado, I would like, after this very short presentation, we are happy to share brochures and invite you also to have access to more information to CERFAM webpage. But without further ado, I would like to introduce now the topic of the day, which will look at the methodology for the development of the good practices and looking at the knowledge exchange platform. I'm looking whether my colleague is ready. Are you ready? Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce to you Cristiani Buani, who is the head of the operations unit here, very experienced with the Center of Excellence in Brazil for almost 10 years. Now she's one of our senior advisor, head of that unit here, and she's leading our work on this knowledge exchange platform. Over to you, Cristiani.
Thank you, Patrick. Welcome, colleagues. I'm very happy to be here today with you. I think it has been a while that we wanted to discuss with you and bring to you this development on knowledge management for CERFAM, which helps, which we hope helps to develop this documentation and work on good practice in Africa. As Patrick was saying, the work on good practice for CERFAM started since the first year, 2019, when we were launched, looking in a very in-depth desk review, connecting to partners, looking what platforms were there, what people were doing good practice. So we went in really a very in-depth look and desk review. We talked to many different partners, as you can see, UN agents, but also NGOs and partners that have been in this area for a while. You know, for example, FAO, they have the platform core, in which also we took a look, we discussed it with the program officers and the coordinators. So it was first to understand what was there and to elaborate what would be our dynamic methodology on good practice. And the methodology of good practice is what is behind the operationalization of CAPT. So the challenge was to put the methodology into a platform that could help us to be more dynamic and also more efficient in disseminating this good practice, but have also a very criterious procedure to certify this good practice, not only from CERFAM, but also involving partners to help in this work. Okay, so just, I'm having a trouble changing the slide. Okay, sorry. So if we start from the start, what is a good practice? And that was part of our desk review to understand what would be our premises, to understand what good practice could be. So we expanded a bit the concept, especially if you're looking at our continent, to say it can be process, activities, results, elements with concrete impacts in SDG2 would be also our target, to really bring concrete results to and information to better implementation of initiatives that could contribute to advance SDG2. Also, it can be a practice in a project, or normally a project that is evaluated or probably not with enough evidence, but also as a success. It can be, another thing that we learned is that process matter, and that's where we have a lot of the capacity strengthening the South-South cooperation. And there can be a very, an important part intrinsic to this evaluation of being or not a good practice. That we have a diversity of initiatives to identify and document good practice, but also that we have the challenge because most of these initiatives are not documentation is not available. So it's not only to evaluate the documentation, but it's also to help partners and countries and WFP to really being able to document it in a way that this information can be accessible and also can provide learning and guidance to additional other partners. So what we thought also that in order to be able to capture as much as we could from Africa and the challenges that are there, we wanted also to see what could be the different levels of good practice that we could have. So we came with 3 different ones. One is the innovative practice. This is the one that they may not be supported by statistics or formal evaluations. They have been normally they have been already tested, and they show a certain level of effectiveness. And they also probably are implemented as a pilot or initial new techniques. So there are certain momentum for this practice, and people are looking at it and requesting it, and there's a minimal evidence of results. Probably something that still needs more practice and more multiplication, but it's something there that it's worth evaluating or assessing. Then the successfully demonstrated practice. There has been proven successful, tangible results in a certain context, which can be different from each country. Probably despite of only being tested in one context, they have components or elements that can be transferred and that it's worth investigating. And they can also represent a risk if you applied in a different context. So that's where the evaluation, the assessment of how much you could multiply this practice comes. And the third level would be the replicable or scale of good practice. Is they have demonstrated, generated desired results in multiple contexts. They have been multiplied, information are there, and they are widely disseminated by adoption of others, no? So then, after this idea of what we could connect, what would be the type of good practice, we would needed to investigate what criteria are of there and what the criteria that are already used by other organizations and how much other criteria we would need to include if we wanted to do this assessment and really capture most of the practice that we want. So we have 9 criteria that you see also in CAPT, and you see also in CAPT the questions that are related to each of the criteria to investigate more on the practice. So each of them represents components for analysis, where you could see if the practice are responding to the 3 and could be classified in one of the 2 criteria. So you can see effectiveness, feasibility, innovation, learning. We will talk more about them in the following slides. So this is CAPT. So what is behind it is the methodology, as we are going to see also the continuation, but this is CAPT, where we have 4 main pillars. So the main pillar is the submission of good practice. So it's where practitioners, users, technical experts could propose practice to be assessed as a good practice. Then the opportunity to become a technical expert. So CAPT has also aims at having this database of experts, technical experts in different areas related to the implementation of SDG 2. Also to provide the opportunity of a forum of expert exchange. Then the idea is to create topics where we can have these experts to discuss about good practice, multiplication, challenges, a space available for connection and networking. And the 4th one is the implementation, the follow-up of your good practice, to provide the opportunity, once a practice is already available in the database, that this practice can be chosen to be multiplied by partners, by WFP, by UN agents, by communities, by governments, and then that CERFAM can mobilize partners and can support to make it happen. So this is what is the methodology behind CAPT. We will start, when you're proposing a good practice, we start a preliminary assessment. This assessment is critical just to understand if the practice is under the objectives of SDG 2, if they are under the thematics that CAPT are able to assess, and if there is a minimum information that we could consider. Once this is submitted to CAPT, then the practitioner, the user, or the person that is submitted needed to go into the quantitative questionnaire. The quantitative questionnaire is where you have the criteria and questions. And this quantitative questionnaire will provide a percentage of what would be correct answers. If the person achieves more than 50%, the practice continues into the assessment till the end to be certified as a good practice. If it's less than 50%, CERFAM will provide specific technical reasons why it was less than 50% and why what would be the areas to improve in case they needed to continue with the process. And after the quantitative questionnaire, everything that the user has posted and applied for the good practice needed to be proved with documentation, with narrative, information. So everything that the project has that can prove the information that has been informed into the quantitative questionnaire. Then, once we have the qualitative questionnaire, this documentation is assembled by CERFAM, and it is proposed by 3 external experts, well-known experts in the area, in the main areas of the project, and then they would provide to CERFAM a recommendation. This recommendation is going to say, based on the information that I have, we see this practice is recommended as innovative practice or as successfully demonstrated practice, and so on. And once we have this information, the practice is published in CAPT and is available. So now let's see a bit on each of the process a bit more in details. So this is just the practice, this is the preliminary assessment, very initial information, type of practice, background, methodological approach, very initial information to make so that we can start knowing what is the practice about. Then here you have an example what it looks when you are in the quantitative questionnaire. So you see, you have the 9 criteria, and every time you respond to questions and you finish one of the criteria, you have this check in green that allows you to know that you finish this criteria. And then in the end, you can also accompany your score so that you can see, accompany a bit how you are going while responding the questions. And this is how the quantitative questionnaire looks like. So it's a process that will take a bit of time for the applicant so that it can be as more coherent, as more comprehensive as possible so that we can have this information in hand to the certification. And here is where we have the review and recommendation by the experts. And normally the experts, as I mentioned, well-known practitioners, depending on the main area. For example, we just had, we finalized the analysis of a practice from Côte d'Ivoire in the region of the North, Korogo, that was for women empowerment and homegrown school feeding value chain. So we tried to connect to practitioners in this area. For example, we connected to institutions that are globally known for this area, for example, as GCNF and others. So that's how we organize for our experts. And once this review is finalized and recommended, then we have 2 final products. The first product is a fact sheet, is a 2-page where we compiled the most information, factors of success, witness, information, testimonies, information of where, objectives, and so on. And also CERFAM provides an analysis report that compile the information, especially for the recommendations, highlights of the analysis that may be, that can be available in case people that are following up or wants to know more about the practice to replicate can have access by requesting to CERFAM. So this is an example of how it is in the platform. So as Patrick was saying, Evelyn also, we already have 4 practice in the kept in the database. We have more 2 practices under analysis, and we have in April now in a total around 10 to 15 practices that have been are to be submitted. And these practices are from WFP Resilience, are from UNICEF, UNOSC, the Brazil Africa Institute, FAO, IFAD. So CERFAM is also trying to expand collaboration with these UN agencies, but also Action contre la faim, NGOs, where we can find this kind of good practice. It's really about the partnership Patrick was talking about, because we know that we know also that WFP doesn't have all the good practice, but we will really benefit from knowing from other institutions, so that CEPT can be this hub of knowledge and good practice, really conveying this information, make it more accessible to governments and partners to take. So we also, with this webinar, I think we also count on you, because WFP colleagues are our entry point. The good practice that we have so far, we have working together with WFP Chad, WFP Congo, also and now more WFP Côte d'Ivoire, so that we can promote this good practice. So for your information, in terms of registrations, how we can register in CEPT. We have an opportunity for WFP to sign with a WFP account. So normally for WFP, you can easily log in. So please try and let us know your experience. And we also have 2 types of users: the generic users that can have access to the good practice, submit and participate in the forum. And then we have also those that apply as technical experts. So the technical experts, they have more, they have accessibility for more features in the platform, and they can also have be one of the experts to be called to analyze this good practice. So the idea is that we can, and for this technical expert, we are also connecting to the discussions with UNECA under the African Union, where they have a portal for experts, where we are trying to connect and really being able to provide as much as opportunity of expertise as possible in CEPT, connecting and collaborating with other institutions that have already done a lot of work in this area. Here is just an example of what, when you enter as a technical expert, what type of information you need to provide. So it will also be a process that you need around 30 minutes to 40 minutes to apply, mainly because we wanted to have certifications, reference, to be the minimal information that we could provide once one requested this type of information. We have also an NGO that works in West Africa that's also requesting us to provide names for technical experts in the different areas. So this is starting little by little, where CERFAM could be also this hub to provide this type of expertise. This is what we expect to have in the next 6 months, a very card of CERFAM's expert network in Africa, where the experts are, where the good practices are, what type of support of availabilities are there, which are the more requested ones, and so forth. The idea is that CEPT will be also a very dynamic platform. We know that is a challenge topic, but we wanted to start. So in the next, if you go to CEPT and you have feedback, please don't hesitate to contact us, because the idea is that we review CEPT in the next 6-7 months, and that we are able to improve and make it more efficient to the needs of the users. So we also count on you, colleagues, to come to us and help us improve it for your better service. The experts forum is where also, as I mentioned to you, we can have different topics available. Really, for example, what is the definition of good practice? We also are inviting partners to come and moderate topics under the expert forum. We will also count on the experts that are in the platform, but also on the users, so that we can know what are the topics they want to discuss, what are the topics that we needed to highlight. So this is the example, for example, where you have the follow-up. If you have, for example, dry cards, let's say the technology for post-harvest loss that Patrick was mentioning, it's there available. The practices that are in the database, you can easily request for the follow-up of this practice. I want more information. I want to replicate. Who could help us replicate this practice? One that we have seen with a lot of potential is the one in Republic of Congo and also here in Korogo. They are a practice that really improve value chain, and they have different entry points and different areas of improvement. They are able to connect to homegrown school feeding. They are empowering women. They are improving the quality and quantity of products that are planet, sorry. And then, so very, very efficiently saying. So this is a bit of what we had for CAPT. I will try just to show it to you online very. So wait a bit. Let me share with you so that you can see that this really exists and is there available for you. So I think you can see already CAPT. So our internet is a bit slow. Let me see. Sorry. Yeah, so you see a bit. So here is if I wanted to register as an expert, I have personal information, educational experience, professional experience. We needed to upload also a photo. So you have here dry card, cassava, sorry, Profo. That is the project from Congo. Profo, oh, Chad, sorry. Here, then the experts forum. Then you have the information going to the experts forum so that you can understand a bit. Then what is the definition of good practice? Then you can just post your information once you register as a users or generic users. So I think, Patrick, I will stop here and just provide you the time for more for questions, information, and we will see later also colleagues from regional office that had been really helping us to make a CAPT more operational and practical to users. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christiane, for this very comprehensive presentation, not only on the process, how it was developed, but also on this digital platform. At this point in time, I would like to give a chance to our participants. If they have any questions, they can raise their hands, or feel free to type also the questions on the chat box. I haven't seen yet any questions. If I'm monitoring the screen, if I don't see any hand, it means either the presentation was very clear and people got it, or maybe we need to give a bit more time for the colleagues to come up with eventual questions or requests of clarification. I would like to say something. This is a joint endeavor. It has been highlighted by Evelyn and Brenda. Definitely, it's a good example of collaboration between regional bureaus. And I would like to recognize and commend the Regional Bureau for East Africa, have been the pioneer in knowledge management, establishing that regional knowledge management position. I remember when I was at HQ. So this means that we can really benefit from each other where that is goes. Having said that, CERFAM has been in place for 2 years, and there is considerable amount of time that has been put together in making sure that we were getting the right definition of good practices. You may have noticed we don't use the term best practice because we feel that a good practice can always be improved, can always be refined. And this is where it comes really clearly in the presentation that has been proposed by Cristiani, to say that, first of all, we work with many other organizations. Why it helped WFP better document what it does, because this, from my experience from the field, has been coming very often. We say we do a lot of things, but how do we communicate about that? How are we sure about the impact of our activities? How do we take them to the scale where it is really seen by the governments and the partners we're working as something that is replicable somewhere else? And we have the processes that go with that. We have the expertise that goes with that. This is where this work is trying to fill the gap. As I monitor, I could see already people chatting on the question answer. And let me welcome the most courageous, who has dropped the first question, Deira Caballero, who is asking, what is the level of engagement of CEPT? Do you keep count of how many users it has? Does it serve the purpose of CERFAM? I guess that question could be directed to you, Cristiani.
Yes, thank you, Deira. Yes, so we, especially now, we are counting on Google Analytics and finalizing the combination so that Google Analytics can provide to us additional information for monitoring and evaluation of CEPT. So yes, we keep how many users, but we're also going to see which are the practice users are more interested, what type of features users are looking when they come to CEPT, if there are any challenging or people that visit more one or two areas of CEPT. So, and I think as Patrick is saying, CEPT is helping CERFAM in the operationalization of the core to service offices. In the South-South, connecting and disseminate this good practice, allowing countries, government partners to have access to this information, but also to provide them the opportunity to talk and to exchange and to learn from each other. But also in the first one, really being able to expand this database of good practice that are accessible, easy to understand, easy to learn, and easy to replicate, I mean, in terms of the information that is provided. So I would say certainly it does, and it's a key tool for CERFAM to operationalize its purpose and mandate.
If I could add to that, is really this work is really at the baby steps so far. It will only grow and be strengthened through the collaboration, that the type of collaboration we're developing, and making sure that first of all you see its benefits to your work, and you see how it can really help you build strong cases, investment cases that you may need. How do you share it with government? How do you share it with donors? How do you inform? I think that Brenda mentioned that. How do we inform better programming by adapting, by correcting, looking what works well elsewhere? And would really value your comments. So feel free to navigate to see how it works, and what further improvement could be brought to that. I'm looking again whether there's any question. Really feel free. Most welcome, Deira Caballero. Well, the most popular thematic areas, there's a follow-up questions on the good practices are, as far as WFP are concerned, are mainly the areas in which we are operating a lot. Homegrown school feeding is definitely on top of the list. Increasingly strengthening national food systems through the strengthening of food value chain. We had a good example of what has been done in the Republic of Congo, in which the cassava value chain, there have been very specific example of what became now a good practice. How do you take expert from Côte d'Ivoire and Benin. So that's really the basis of South-South cooperation. Expert in a private, well, semi-private enterprise in Côte d'Ivoire, and one in Benin, and take them to Congo and help adapt machines that can transform cassava into a new product that now is opening to new markets, training women organizations mainly how to use not only those machines, but in terms of marketing, in terms also of processing the food, etc. So this is an example, a very concrete example of the thematic area that have been most popular. I would like to give a chance at this point. Feel free to continue to really drop your questions on the chat. I would like to not only recognize the work that has been done with the regional bureaus, but also give a chance to the colleagues who have collaborated for this, well, the organization of the webinar, to really tell us a bit more on their approach on knowledge management, the activities they are doing, how they're leveraging South-South perspective in their region and beyond their region. So the first speaker that we will have right now is Lydia Jamenia, Knowledge Management Officer at RBM, so the Regional Bureau for East Africa. She will be followed by Mrs. Marek Kaladze, who is head of the program cycle, who will also tell us what she has to say for RBD perspective. Without further ado, Lydia Jamenia, most welcome to the webinar, and thank you very much for putting it together. And in the light of the presentation that just has been done and all the work you're doing, it would be really important to see not only what is the work you're doing on knowledge management in your region, and how do you think the work of CERFAM could be of help to country offices, or how do you see the entry points, and what else can we do really to leverage the work of WFP on this space of enabling, developing, of changing lives. Over to you, Lydia. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Christiane, for your previous presentation. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a short presentation that I'd like to share. So if you just give me some few minutes. Okay. Okay, please confirm you can see my screen.
We can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, so thank you so much. My name is Lydia Jamenia. I'm the Knowledge Management Officer at the Regional Bureau of Nairobi. And my presentation is going to be brief, but I am going to talk about the knowledge management initiatives at the Regional Bureau of Nairobi, or East Africa, what we have been doing in terms of documenting good practices, and where we see our collaboration with CEPT in terms of leveraging the benefits that are accruing from this platform, as well as increasing the agenda of knowledge management in Africa. So just as a beginning, in terms of knowledge management in the Regional Bureau of Nairobi, we have been very instrumental in ensuring that we are institutionalizing knowledge management in the Regional Bureau. And as such, beginning of this year, we had the Regional Knowledge Management Strategy approved by our management. And following this approval of the Regional Knowledge Management Strategy, we embarked on creating awareness of what knowledge management really is for the Regional Bureau, as well as what it means to institutionalize knowledge management within the different units. So by this, we mean, what does it mean? What does it take to have units recognize that knowledge management is actually beneficial for them? What knowledge management activities can they start doing so that we can make sure that this becomes embedded in our work plans rather than something that we view as an add-on. So this has been something that has been ongoing since January of this year. We are currently developing a knowledge management toolkit, and this toolkit is aimed at providing guidance to the various knowledge management tools that we have, the various knowledge management activities like documenting of good practices, documenting of lessons learned, conducting after action reviews. At what point do we sit down and do these activities? So we are planning to put together a knowledge management toolkit that will provide guidance to our country offices, to the regional bureau, and we are looking to collaborate on this to make sure that it is a very enhanced and a very usable, user-friendly toolkit that is going to benefit our staff in terms of knowledge management. We are also working with units to identify knowledge management priorities, and we are providing support to that. Together with CERFAM, we are part of, and RBJ, we are part of a network called the African Knowledge Management Hub. The African Knowledge Management Hub is a consortium that has been put together by ECA, and it consists of different UN agencies. And as part of this consortium, we are leading in activities one, which includes conducting a KM assessment, just to see where we are in terms of knowledge management, as well as developing an expert database. And this is where we can leverage on CERFAM, because CERFAM not only has developed a platform that helps in identification and documentation of good practices, but the platform itself is it's an expertise database where you can go and seek expertise in different thematic areas. Sorry. And then we are also supporting units in documenting good practices and lessons learned. So those are some of the activities that we are doing in the Regional Bureau. And just to keep up with the theme of this webinar, why do we think that it is beneficial for us to conduct good practices, or to identify and document and share our good practices? If you have been attending the executive boards recently, you will realize that there is a theme that is constantly cropping up. And this theme or issue, if I may call it, is the issue of innovation and digitization. And it has been said most recently and in the recent past that innovations should be supported by sound evidence demonstrating the relevance and utility vis-a-vis WFP and partners. We've had donors like Denmark, UK, USA, Australia, France, Spain, strongly questioning our speculative projects that draw financial and technical resources away from already impactful projects. So they are questioning, why are we talking about innovation when we have projects that have been strongly demonstrated to be impactful? And so that is why we need to really demonstrate and identify good practices, because by documenting and identifying good practices, then we build an evidence base in which we can justify some of these innovations. And as we know, and as Christiane said, that there are 3 levels of good practices. We have the promising practice, we have the good practice, and we have the scalable practice. And if we have our staff in the field, in the country offices, and even in the regional bureau, take the time to identify what we have in terms of innovation, in terms of pilots, seeing the evidence that are there, and then taking the time to document this, then it means that we have strong evidence to justify why it is we are embarking on innovation and digitization. So evidence base that shows where we are in terms of our sustainable innovations, what we are doing in terms of our impactful approaches. And more than that, it also helps us to really reduce the work of reinventing the wheel. And a good example is this. In our regional knowledge management strategy, we have a pillar that we call digitization, IT. And in this pillar, what we wanted to do is to come up with a platform that was all-encompassing, that could include communities of practice, that could be a repository, etc. But since CERFAM has already done this, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. This is already a good practice in itself. And that is the benefit of actually identifying good practices, so that you can piggyback to what people have already done, because resources have been committed to this. It avoids us spending more resources in developing a platform where a good platform already exists and that could benefit the regional, the region, not only our region, but also the other regions in Africa as well. It also reduces the loss of knowledge, which is a very common knowledge management problem. And if we have good practices, if we have expertise, even if this expertise move to other organizations, as long as they are there, they are captured in this platform, it becomes easier to reach out to them. And that makes us have that access to tacit knowledge as well as explicit knowledge. So what challenges are we trying to address with this platform? Why do we think it is a good idea to partner with CEPT? So for us, we have challenges, and one of these some of these challenges are we have sufficient knowledge, but we usually struggle to compare our knowledge with others because of access issues. We don't yet have, or we don't know where we can access and compare our practices against others, either internally or externally. We also have a problem of where to find good practices. We know they exist, but really we don't know where to find them. And having CEPT as a platform is going to really address this particular problem. Sometimes it is difficult to know which practice is suitable for our situation. So just to give an example, if one practice, let me use the cassava one that Patrick mentioned, it is working well in Congo, but if we want to replicate, do we know if it would work in Rwanda or in Kenya or in Sudan, for example? So having an expertise database actually helps in following up and seeing if that particular practice that has been identified is replicable in a particular context. And it helps adapt this particular practice to the different contexts that we have. Because in this regional bureau, we have different contexts in terms of economy, in terms of politics, etc. So the contexts are different. So having a platform that can assist in identifying the practice, but also ensuring that this practice is adaptable is a good idea. And that is why we are collaborating. One of the challenges that I haven't listed is always the challenge of identifying the practice itself. We have been working with our units who always tells us that, we want to document best practices or good practices, and they go for missions and then they come and put down together a good practice. But the problem with that approach is that it is very subjective. So for example, if we were to talk about documenting good practices of COVID-19, the adaptability of COVID-19 to the school feeding process, I'm going to use that because that is what we are doing right now. And we say that one of the good practices was that, we embraced WASH practices. We put together, or we started constructing hand washing points where students could wash their hands, and that reduced the amount of infections that we were seeing in schools. But is that really a good practice? You know, is that something that we should have been doing all along? Should we have been, you know, consulting with UNICEF and seeing how to integrate WASH into our programming all along? Why are we thinking that that is a good practice? So the CAPT platform actually provides us with a methodology on how we can identify good practices, you know, and it is that practice that has been identified is put through a rigorous criteria, so that at the end of it, we know that there is evidence that is supporting this practice as a good practice. So that is why we want to work with CAPT, and that is why we see our points of convergence, that the good practices that are emanating for our region will be able to be subjected against a rigorous criteria, and these practices will be available for all to learn. And in turn, we can also have access to the practices from other countries, and we can see how we can adapt to them and replicate them in our region. I think I've talked about why we document and share good practices. Really, it is because we want to make sure that we have good programming, that we do not repeat the same mistakes, that we do not replicate, we do not reinvent the wheel, but rather replicate and you know, learn from successful experiences. So CAPT is going to help to increase visibility of the initiatives in the region. It's also going to help identify and document potential good practices against a very rigorous methodology. I've talked about that. And CAPT gives us the opportunity to reach out to expertise who can multiply these good practices and allow for the space for experts to discuss and present the challenges and solutions. So really basically creating a community of practice of sorts, and it can support in the multiplication of good practices in our region. So that is why we want and we see the benefit of having this interregional collaboration, so that you can learn from us on how we are doing in knowledge management, and we can learn from you on how to best document and present our best practice, and learning from each other, and transforming WFP into a learning organization, which is the end goal for knowledge management in this region. So I'm going to stop there and give it back to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very insightful presentation, Lydia. It's very clear that the work of RBN on knowledge management is can definitely be shared, since it's quite advanced. And the question you're asking are precisely the questions many others are asking. And I like this reference to what the donors are saying. Why do you constantly try to innovate when you already have very impactful interventions? Is it not more effective, efficient, you name it, just to take to scale or replicate what is already working somewhere? We don't have a clear answer. This is precisely why we're doing the work, is because what works well somewhere may not work somewhere else. This is the entire work of CERFAM and many others, in making sure that as we go together, we try to facilitate this transition. Let me give you a very simple example. With a request we received from the Republic of Guinea to look at how we strengthen the value chain of rice, we don't go there with a ready-made solution. We're saying these are the good practices somewhere else, but we need to assess first how the situation, the context, and see how the stakeholders are involved. It's very clear that you need to have high impact interventions. You need to have the involvement, the commitment, this engagement at a very high level, strategic level, because you need to have that at the policy level, the regulatory framework, but also take it gradually to the operational level. So this is I like all the areas you have found to partner with CERFAM on that, and kept, as you rightly said, is a tool, is not what is important in the process is really to nurture this idea that we need to invest more time, more resources in documenting what we do and what we do well. How do we learn from that? We know that we have impact evaluations, we have all those decentralized evaluation audits and assessments that we do. How do we really use those criteria in a very robust way, so we can build those cases that will help us define that this is a good practice, and we can implement them. I would like to stop there temporarily with you, Lydia, and give a chance to Marek Kamladze, who is the head of the program cycle RBD, also to tell us what is the RBD perspective. Welcome, Marek. You have joined the region recently, but I understand you came with a very wealth of knowledge also from your previous posting. And how do we build on what Lydia has said with regard to our approach to knowledge management? What is the positioning of RBD with regard to that? And how do you see also this work with CERFAM and with others on promoting good practices, high impact solutions to zero hunger? Over to you, Marek. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So I will speak a little bit about our perspective from the Regional Bureau Dakar and what it is we are doing at this moment and what we're planning in the future to enhance knowledge management. A lot has been said about the importance of knowledge management in general, so I'm not going to go too much into details on that. And I will also follow with some thoughts based on what I've heard so far. So first of all, we are really very pleased to be part of this webinar, which is introductory webinar, and to collaborate on a knowledge exchange platform with CERFAM and RBN. So we think that this initiative comes in a particularly critical time, and it's a very good time for such an initiative. In particular, we were thinking that as many of you, our WFP country offices are engaging with national governments and other UN agencies in the development of the UN SDCFs. And also we're now starting on the journey of the second generation CSPs, which we would hope will be based on the learning from the previous CSPs. The knowledge management and learning agenda could not be basically more important. Also, we think that the way that the UN itself as a system is reforming, it's putting more efforts on knowledge management at the broader UN level as well. The new UN cooperation frameworks, they are meant to be more based on an adaptive approach and adaptive programming with feedback loops, learning, and a more systematic adjustment based on the lessons learned. So we don't know how this will play out in actuality, but at least on the learning part, we think that this is a key opportunity. In RBD region, it's a very interesting region, both in terms of the diversity of countries and contexts in which we operate, but also regional similarities and issues that affect countries across the borders. So again, there is so much opportunity to learn from good practices, from experiences, and we at the Regional Bureau are very much aware of the need to invest more in knowledge management, and I will talk to you in a little bit some of the areas in which we're doing this already. But also to think through knowledge management in a more holistic way, so that at the regional level, we're able to capture good practices, lessons, and benefit more widely from an exchange of ideas, so that nothing gets lost. In RBD, we are now fully engaged on learning agenda in different areas. As an example, the school feeding, gender, social protection, adaptive social protection. We're also thinking about integrated resilience approaches, nutrition and value chains, basically everything that we do in every area. We have a knowledge management agenda ongoing. At the same time, in a way that is a little bit more broader and looks at not so much what we deliver, but how we deliver. We're also developing a knowledge management exercise on institutional capacity strengthening, where we'll be thinking beyond the thematic elements, also with the focus not just on the content, but how the intervention was designed, and what were the elements of delivery that were successful. At the same time, this was mentioned, of course, we put a lot of importance right now on generating research, rigorous evidence, and looking at approaches, innovative approaches that are scalable yes, scalable. So again, this is the entire bureau that is backing this agenda. Of course, BAM and our evaluation colleagues are in the lead. So that being said, I just had some quick thoughts based on what I heard so far. So I find this use of term good practice actually quite significant, because I think that best practices is often a term that is kind of misused and overused, and implies this supply-driven, ready-made solution that is just there somewhere in the ether, and you can take it from, say, Germany and apply it to Burkina Faso. And in reality, it doesn't work, and it's also something that maybe governments find a little bit not very appealing, that type of approach, when we come with that type of approach. So when we talk about good practices and understanding that this is always something that can be improved, we think that it's not only the final product, whether it's a policy, an institutional setup, or any other solution that is being developed, but also the process of how it's derived. How do you come to a solution that is adequate and can work in a particular context? So we're quite glad to hear that this element, which seems procedural and maybe not so important, that this is not overlooked, and that this was something that was mentioned several times. I also find it interesting and would like to understand how it will work better in practice, this combination of documentation as well as having experts that can add on to documented best practices the elements that cannot be fully codified. So the tacit knowledge part of it, how we can combine documented best practices and have the required human interaction that goes along with it to really be able to fully share and learn from each other. And finally, also very happy to hear about the fact that this platform will be broader than just WFP, so that we can not only find additional good practices from elsewhere, but also maybe use it as an opportunity to collaborate, come up with joint ideas, and work in complementarity with others, in addition through this platform. So these were some of our thoughts, and we look forward to operationalizing this platform and working more closely and continuing this joint effort. Over.
Thank you very much, Marek. As you rightly said, RBD is a very vast region with very different realities that commonly we say the coastal area, the Sahelians, and you have different experiences and practices that should be adapted to the situation. I really like your points on having a holistic approach on knowledge management. It's clear that the way we see it is not just about a tool, about a platform. It's about a mindset. It's about making sure that as we work, we encompass that in our planning, in our program design, in the implementation, in the evaluation, in the monitoring that we're doing of our intervention. That's really clear. We look forward definitely working hand in hand with the region, because the process is really important in the sense that, as Christiane was explaining, is just about coming and populating straight. There is a process of discussion, and how it goes, the country office learn from that experience, because they have to provide more information, they have to provide additional references, and during that process is really a very healthy conversation that takes place in making sure that there's a reflection behind what we do and how we document it and how we analyze it in a way that can be useful. And yes, impact, high impact is necessary. We have a plethora of pilots, but the pilots that fail to really have that impact, the massive impact we want in a region, in a country, can only go so far about that. Thank you again, Marek, Lydia, and Christiane. I would like to give a chance also to ask our attendees to ask a few questions if there's any. I'm monitoring the chat books. I don't seem to have to see any question there. If not, I would really see, okay, from your experience, how do you think the way WFP operates, or the approach of WFP on knowledge management, how does it differ to the other UN agencies that you know? And I like when Lydia was presenting this African Knowledge Hub, how do you think that WFP can play a critical role there? How can it benefit really from the experience and the knowledge of the other organizations with this African Knowledge Hub? I will drop this question to Lydia, Christiane, and Marek. Over to you. Who is volunteering to go first?
I can volunteer to go first.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Go ahead.
Yes. So as I said, the African Knowledge Management Hub is a consortium of UN agencies that have come together to advance the knowledge management agenda in Africa. So as a first point of reference, what we did was to conduct, and WFP and FAO actually led in this process, was to conduct a knowledge management audit or a knowledge management assessment to see where we are in terms of level of maturity in knowledge management. WFP is at level 3. We have organizations that are at level 5 where knowledge management is pretty institutionalized. That is where we aim to be at in WFP. So where we see as a point of reference and as a point of collaboration is to really look at where other organizations are doing well in terms of knowledge management and leverage on that and seek collaborations and to see what can we learn from these organizations and how can we bring it back to WFP and how can we implement some of these activities so that we can further advance the knowledge management agenda to transform WFP into a knowledge-centric organization, but not just a knowledge-centric organization, but a learning organization. And to that effect, we've been very, very privileged to reach out to UNICEF, thanks to Christiani. And we were discussing with UNICEF on how they go about documenting their best practices. I know that UNICEF also has a very vibrant KM toolkit. So how can we learn from them and develop one ourselves, because we are in the process of developing one? How can we, for example, reach out to IFAD, who is very advanced? They are at level 4 in the knowledge management maturity level. How did they do it? How did they manage to put in place a knowledge management governance structure, which doesn't seem to, we don't seem to have that in WFP. Well, with the exception of RBN, and I can see that, more and more recently, other regional bureaus are starting to recognize the need to hire knowledge management experts, because this is an area which some say is new, but it is really not new. It's just that we haven't really explored how we can benefit from knowledge management. But I see a lot of opportunities, and Christiani will tell you that KEPT was actually a good practice amongst AKMH, and that is how we get to learn from each other, and it is a very good thing. And as Marek said, it is part of the UNDS. It's part of the new generation CSPs. We need to figure out how we can embed knowledge management and advance this agenda in Africa. So I'll stop there. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Any additional point, Marek, Christiani?
Yeah, so maybe I would just complement few pieces from Lydia. I think the African Hub Knowledge Management Initiative is really trying to provide that pieces come together from knowledge management, so that they can understand what is available and what is the best way to combine these pieces, that they are available for partners, for communities, for stakeholders in Africa, and that we are able to really use this information to advance program implementation. So it's something that's needed. It's really aimed to be very practical, applied to the ground, and I think that's where the connection to KEPT is also, that we are able to offer this platform as a very specific mandate. And I think from our discussions that we have seen, it's true that IFAD, FAO, UNICEF, they have their platforms, but it's true also that KEPT is quite unique in really being specific for good practice and being able to provide the whole methodology into a platform where people can follow the process, no? And I think that's the idea, that this African Hub can really potentialize the synergies and complementarities in between the different agencies, that we learn more how to work together, because I think we have already seen and stated this, that the work in good practice is very connected to partnerships, building and expansion. So I think that's where we see this connection.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. As Lydia was saying, it's not about reinventing the wheel, but really, you put it right, creating the synergies, benefiting from the complementarities we're looking at. Marek, I know that you're the head of the program cycle, RBD. How do you see really good practices and knowledge management at large benefiting that process? I know you mentioned the new generation of CSP. What could be the role on that, if you see any?
Yeah, so I think what I was trying to say is that in the larger context in which we operate, which is the UN family context, there are changes, and in the context of the reform, where we're moving towards a practice of being more adaptive and having more of a adaptive programming process. So not to move away a little bit from being very supply driven and saying, okay, this is what we're offering for the next few years, but rather to have more of an idea of, okay, let's look back and let's adjust and let's see what is working and what is not working. So in that context, of course, a learning agenda and an agenda that is driven by knowledge management is very important and very appropriately fits in this context. So that was a little bit the point I was trying to make.
Thank you so much. I'm happy we're doing quite well with time, but I'm wondering whether there's any other question that participants would like to put forward. Okay, I just have a last one for the panelists. Before maybe we do a recap, and I know you're all busy, try to be brief in a minute. If there were 2-3 main points you would pitch for knowledge management or kept to benefit the fight against hunger and malnutrition, what would it be? Let's start with you, Christiane, while the colleagues can think about that. Let me repeat the question. I say, if you have just a minute to pitch about that, to advance that, and you have your regional director on the elevator, and you want to make sure that there are resources and this work can be put forward. It can be also the executive director visiting your region.
Oh, that's very short. And I'm a Brazilian, we tend to speak a lot, so I'm trying to do it quickly. I think we need to show that knowledge management documentation is good practice, is a core area, innovative area where WFP has already a lot to offer, and that it's key for us to position ourselves in Africa. It's an area where people are trying to advance, but WFP has all the tools together to be in the edge of these discussions, to really lead these discussions and to bring partners together to make concrete advances in the ground and with where our beneficiaries are.
Thank you. That was punchy. Who wants to go next? Lydia?
Sure. So if I were to pitch this, I would go back to what has been coming out of the executive boards. What do our donors want? Our donors want us to tell them why we are innovating, why we are not, relying on the most impactful approaches, and why we are spending money on innovation and digitization, right? They want us to show them the evidence that what we are doing is actually working. But we are not able to do that because we don't have this evidence in one particular place where we can show them, see, this is what we have been doing. This is the evidence that this is working, and this is why we want to scale up, replicate, or even come up better this approach by developing a new one. So that said, we can actually pitch this as a way to actually generate evidence, as a way to build our evidence and knowledge base to showcase what we are doing in Africa and how this has an impact in ending malnutrition and hunger. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for those words. Last words, Marek?
Sure. We also like to speak at length as Georgians, but I'll
like
try. So I think one frustrating thing that I found in WFP is that sometimes we pitch something as an innovative approach and it was already done by someone, and that someone sometimes is in the room and is not very happy that something that they have already tried before is all of a sudden something new. So that's, I think, one element of this. And on the external side, in terms of how we collaborate and work with partners, I think having documented something helpful where you can show what your value added is and what types of things you do can definitely help create those complementary investments and complementary interventions for maximum impact for the country. So those would be my two. Over.
Thank you so much for those words. I'm monitoring whether there were more questions. I know there is one question from Tu Nielsen, and feel free to type the questions. We will answer to them. We will put together a report where you will have most of the questions and the answered. So the question from Tu Nielsen is: any plans of making human sustainability a must consideration for best practice? You want to take it?
I can try.
Okay, that's what we're doing here. Let's practice.
I mean, I think human sustainability is a new concept. Maybe too, you can, can tell me if I'm correctly. But what we try in the sustainability criteria is to include all the dimensions that are related to the system. It means, for example, human capital, connection to production, consumption. So depending on the product, depending on the project that we are analyzing, these are the components that we take there. So probably what we can do, if you can go, or we can go together at some time in the questions that are under sustainability, you will see a bit, for example, on food loss and these type of things that we tried to be as general as possible in one, but it's something that we look and is one of the points that are to be considered as a good practice. So it's embedded in the criteria of sustainability, but we can always look together and see if there's any additional point that we can add. And just for your information, a lot of the analysis we have been doing in responding to other complementing Patrick, we have received a lot of practice in resilience. And what we have seen that these programs, they are very comprehensive, and the resilience from all value chain, from production to consumption, and they normally tend to also go in this analysis. So just to tell you.
No, thank you, Christiane, for taking that. As Tu Nielsen said, that's true that WFP, there is this maybe this tendency to focus on people's sustainability. Why don't we have a more comprehensive overview beyond just people? It's very important to save lives and to change lives, but also to protect the environment, sustainable environment, a sustainable way of consuming, of producing. Those are all elements of the discussion, and I think we will have the opportunity. WFP is the lead of the track action 5 or the food system summit that is coming, and there have been really dialogue going on. WFP should feel free to participate in that dialogue. For those who went to WFP Go today, you may have seen this page on WFP contribution to ongoing dialogues on food system, and we're really giving a chance to shape the way we want to see national food system. Resilient yet sustainable, and that doesn't just damage the environment for the and we know how WFP has been increasingly also being engaged more in that space. I would say that conversation. Recently there have been a workshop, a webinar organized by David Catrud and Gernot Lavanda on climate change and adaptation and other work that WFP could really collaborate and play a more important role in that. Thank you all. I think that we need to, as much as I would love to stay with you, and I think that I would like to thank really all the attendees for staying all along. This shows that there are real interest in the conversation we've been having, and I would like to thank the panelists for the presentation that were made. What I retain is really there is a space. There is a space for WFP to play, to leverage its role play a major role, which is knowledge management. When it comes to eradicating hunger, combating all forms of malnutrition, promoting more sustainable agriculture, you name it, SDG 2, by the way, that is just this slide that I'm portraying. It's important to look at what the others are doing as well. So creating these synergies, these complementarities, but accepting, review critically what we're doing. And this is what the process of good practices is helping us. While you're documenting, you don't see yourself more beautiful than you are, but you look at critically whether, through that process, those criteria, you're really bringing about the transformation that you said that you're bringing. And to respond to donors, there's no one final answers, but in this area of globalization and digitization, we need to adjust. We need that agility that Marek was saying, to move away from this supply-driven aspect, to listen a bit more to national governments. And we are in an area where we have more assertive national governments who really want to be on the lead to drive their development agenda. And this is where WFP can really play this role on not just doing, delivering, but enabling, facilitating others to do. And I think this work of knowledge management really is critical in that endeavor. So just a few words about this is a learning journey, and we really welcome this presentation. I think we have shown how two regions can work together and put together what they have to say, bring on the table, and we build around that. And I like this idea of already coming as a group on this African knowledge management hub. This really shows that we need to be sitting more often around that table and advocating for the good practices that we have been implementing on the field. So this is a learning journey, and as we're learning, we build a more robust investment case. So let's be ahead of the curve rather than behind. That's why innovation is there to disrupt. There was at one point the slogan, we need to disrupt hunger. So we count on you to really populate, expand this database and engage with CERFAM in this process. As I said, in this conversation, we will be looking forward to engaging with you. I would like to just give you a few steps. This series of webinar tomorrow will be organizing the French version for our colleagues Francophone, and have also the pleasure to have the regional director from RBD with us for a few opening remarks. Is really a process of how do we make sure that it doesn't stay within WFP only, but as we go, we make sure that we publicize, we leverage this outreach to national governments and other organizations. So what we will be doing tomorrow and the days to come is to document what has been done today and share it for you to strengthen, but also the next step will be a call forward jointly organized by the regional director RBD for West Africa and the government of Côte d'Ivoire to launch officially the platform and call forward for good practices. The call forward for people to come and submit their good practices will go beyond just WFP. That's one. And guess what? We have even better. We are planning to organize a side event at the board in November. We're hopeful, let's cross fingers, this is gonna work, and we can work with you on really going there and showing the work we've been doing on that. And I agree with Lydia, if the donors are already looking at innovation, not welcoming it, we need to build a strong case. But I think we have a good platform, we have a good approach, and I would like to thank you all really for collaborating and making this webinar a success. Again, I've been asked to do some closing remarks. I would like to recognize and really appreciate the participation of Evelyn Eti, the Deputy Regional Director for West Africa, and Brenda Behem, Regional Deputy Director for East Africa, who really during their opening remarks set the tone and gave us almost a sort of roadmap of how we need to strengthen this collaboration between us. And we will take it to the next level, hopefully, with your collaboration. And I would like personally to thank Christiane for putting that together, with Lydia, Marek, and the rest of the team, all those have worked behind the team of CERFAM. Thanks to attendees. And we look forward to the next webinar with CERFAM. So we're together. So let's do it. Let's leverage the good practices to eradicate hunger and malnutrition in Africa and beyond. Thank you again, and look forward to meeting you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, colleagues. Bye.